Welcome to the next edition of the Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Voice of the Customer podcast series. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator for this ongoing discussion on digital transformation. Stay with us now to learn how agile businesses are fending off disruption in favor of innovation. Our next thought leadership panel discussion explores the rapidly evolving architectural shift of moving advanced IT capabilities to the edge to support Internet of Things requirements. The demands of data processing, real-time analytics, and platform efficiency at the intercept of IoT and business benefits has forced new technology approaches. We'll now hear how converged systems and high-performance data analysis platforms are bringing, in essence, the data center to the operational technology edge. To hear more about the latest capabilities in gaining unprecedented measurements and operational insights where it's needed most, please join me in welcoming our panel. We're here with Phil McCrell, General Manager of IoT Consortia at PTC. Welcome, Phil.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks, Dana.
We're also here with Gavin Hill, IoT Marketing Engineer for Northern Europe at National Instruments in London. Welcome, Gavin.
Hey, Dana. Thanks very much for inviting us along.
Good to have you with us. Olivier Frank joins us. He's Senior Director of Worldwide Business Development and Sales for Edgeline IoT Systems at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Welcome, Olivier.
Thank you, Dana. Great to be here with you.
Gentlemen, let's start at a high level. What's driving this need for a different approach to compute when we think about Internet of Things and we think about the edge of organizations? Why is this becoming such a hot issue today?
Yeah, I think there's several drivers, but the one I think is most interesting is just economics. So in the past, the cost that it would require to take an operational site, say a mine or a refinery, a factory, and do some serious predictive type analysis means you would have to spend more money than you probably get back in many cases. So for very high value assets, maybe assets that are millions, tens of millions of dollars, many of them probably do have some systems in place in some of these facilities where that's been around for a while. But once you get a little bit lower in the asset class, there just really hasn't been an ROI available in most cases. And I think what we're seeing now is that's all changing based on the type of technology available.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Phil. So in essence, we have this whole untapped tier of technologies that we haven't been able to do a machine-to-machine benefit from, or even gathering information, or the next stage, which is analyzing that information. How big a opportunity is this? Is this a step change, or is this a minor incremental change? Why is this economically a big deal, Olivier?
Yeah, I think it's we're talking about Industry 4.0. Yeah, as the fourth generation of changing after steam, after the internet, after the cloud, and now is this application of IoT to the industrial world. And what is changing fundamentally is both. It's at multiple levels. It's what's happening within the factories. It's what's happening within this ecosystem of suppliers to the manufacturers, and the interaction with consumers of those suppliers and customers. So there is a notion of connectivity to this, to those different parties that we can then put together. And I think the big difference, while our customers have been doing process automation for 40 years, what we're doing together as partners is really unleashing the IT standardization, taking technologies that were in the data centers and applying that to the world of process automation. So opening up. Maybe the analogy would be a bit what happened when mainframe were challenged by mini computer and then by PCs, right? That's a bit the same thing. It's now open architecture in a world that's been very much closed.
Mm-hmm. Now, Phil mentioned return on investment. Gavin, what is it about the technology price points and capabilities that have come down to the point where it makes sense now to go down to this lower tier of devices and start gathering information?
Yeah, for me, I think that there's kind of two pieces to that. The first one is that potentially we're seeing that the value from understanding more about the OT world is more valuable than we thought. So that piece is the first piece. And, McKinsey Global Institute did a bit of a study, and they say they're pretty sure that by about 2025, we're going to be in a situation where the IoT in the factory space is going to be worth somewhere between $1.2 billion and $3.7 billion. So that first off says a lot. But then the second piece is, exactly emulating what the guys have had to say here. We're at a stage where we can make technology at a much lower price point. We can create sensors using things like MEMS sensors, which are very, very cheap now, and we can put those onto the assets that we have in these industrial environments quite cheaply. We can then take that in, and then you actually deal with the real big value actually being the data. And that is what all three of us, I would say, are quite good at getting the value from in our own respective areas of expertise. And just to let people understand what that means, you look at someone that we worked with like Jaguar Land Rover, who in their production sites, in their powertrain facilities, were at a stage where they created an awful lot of data, but didn't do anything with it. They had 90% of their data wasn't being used for anything. It doesn't matter how many sensors you put on something, if you can't do anything with the data, it's completely useless. And they've been using techniques like what we've been doing in our collaborative efforts, similar to that, to gain insight from that data. And now they're at a stage where they would say that probably 90% of their data is usable. And that's the big change for me.
Mm-hmm. Right. Let's learn a little bit more about your organizations and how you're working collaboratively, as you mentioned, before we get back into understanding how to go about architecting properly for IoT benefits. PTC, tell us a little bit about that, Phil. And I understand you won an award in Barcelona recently.
Yeah, so that was a collaboration that our three organizations had together with a pump and valve manufacturer by the name of Flowserve. And I think as Gavin was explaining, there's a lot of learning that had to be done up front about what kind of sensors you need and what kind of signals you need off those sensors to come up with accurate predictions. And so when we collaborate together, we rely very heavily on National Instruments for their scientists and engineers to provide that expertise. We really need to consume digital data. We can't really do anything with the analog signal when we don't have the expertise to understand what kind of signals we need. But when we have that, then with HPE we can economically crunch that data, provide those predictions, provide that optimization because of HPE's hardware that now can live happily in those production environments.
Mm-hmm. And tell us a bit about PTC specifically. What does your organization do?
So, for the Internet of Things, we have a complete end-to-end platform that allows everything from going to data acquisition gateway with National Instruments, for instance, all the way up through machine learning, augmented reality, dashboards and mashups, really any sort of interface that might be needed for people or their systems to interact. And in an operational setting, there may be one or two, or there may be dozens of different sources of information. You may have information coming from the PLCs in the factory. You may have things coming from an MES or ERP system. There's all kinds of possible sources. We take that, we orchestrate the logic, and then we make that available for human decision making or to feed into another system.
So the applications that PTC is developing is relying upon platforms and the extension of the quote-unquote data center down to the edge. So tell us, Olivier, about Edgeline and how that fits into this.
Yes, so we came with this idea of leveraging the enterprise, compute excellence that is our DNA within HPE, and bring that next to the things into the, as our CEOs say we want to be the IT in the IoT, right? And happens that about 40%, according to IDC, 40% of the IoT compute will happen at the edge. Okay, so and by the way, just to clarify, it's not an opposition between the edge and the hybrid IT that we have in HPE. It's actually a continuum. Is that some of the workloads you need to bring them to the edge? This notion of time of insight and time of action. The closer you are to what you're measuring, the more real time you are. So we came with this idea that what if we could bring the depth of compute we have in the data center in this kind of sub-second environment where I need to read this intelligent data created by my two partners here, but also actuate them. I do things with them. So take the example of the pump. Imagine that there would be an electric shortcut and for some reason it caught fire. You don't want to send that data to the cloud, right? You want to take immediate action. This is notion of real time, so and immediate action. So we take the deep compute, we integrate the connectivity with National Instruments. So we are the first platform that is integrated industry standard called PXI, which allows a National Instrument to integrate the great portfolio of sensors and acquisition and analog to digital conversion technologies into our systems. And finally, we bring enterprise manageability. You can imagine that as we have proliferation of systems, system management at the edge becomes a problem. And so we're bringing our award-winning and millions of licenses sold with ILO, our integrated lighthouse that we're selling in all our ProLiant. We're bringing that technology as well at the edge.
Mm-hmm. So we have the compute depth from HPE. We have insightful analytics and applications from PTC. What does NI or National Instruments bring to the table? And describe the company a bit too for us, Gavin.
Yeah, sure. So National Instruments as a company, we're about a $1.2 billion company worldwide, and we actually we get involved in an awful lot of industries. But in the IoT space, where we really see ourselves fitting within this collaboration with PTC and HPE, is our ability to essentially make a lot of machines smarter. So there's already some sensors a lot of the time on assets, machines, pumps, wherever they may be, on the factory floor. But for older or potentially even some newer devices, there's not natively all the sensors that you need to be able to make really good decisions based off of that data. So to be able to feed into the PTC systems, to the HPE systems, you need to have the right start-off data to start off with. And we have the data acquisition and control units that allow us to, first of all, take that data in, but then do something smart with it. So using something like our Compact Rio system, or as you've described, using the PXI platform with the Edgeline products, we can, at a certain level of understanding and a certain level of just a smart nature to these potentially dumb devices, and allow us to not only take in signals, but also potentially control the systems as well. So being able to not only have some great information back from PTC that lets us know when something's going to fail, but we could potentially use their data and their information to allow us to, let's say, decide to run a pump at half load for a little bit longer. So that means that we could get, say, a maintenance engineer out to an oil rig in an appropriate time to fix it before it runs to failure. And we have that ability to control as well as to read in. And what I would say, the other piece of that is, sensor data is great, and we like to be as open as possible and take in from any sensor vendor, any sensor provider will take in that data. But you want to be able to find the needle in the haystack there. So we'll do some feature extraction to try and make sure that we give the important pieces of digital data back to PTC, and so that can be processed by the Edgeline system as well.
And this is very fundamental, if I may. I think the capturing the right data is an art and a science, and that's really what the National Instruments is bringing, because you don't want to capture noise, and it's proliferation of data. So that's a very, very unique expertise that we're very glad to integrate in the partnership.
So we certainly understand now the big benefit of IoT extending what people have done with operational efficiency over the years. We now know that we have the technical capabilities to do this at an acceptable price point. But what are the obstacles? What are the challenges that organizations still have in creating a true data-driven edge, an IoT rich environment? Phil?
Yeah, I think that's why we are together in this consortium, because I think the biggest obstacle is there's so many different requirements for different types of technology and expertise that typically people get overwhelmed by that. They'll spend months, years trying to figure this out, and we come to the table really with end-to-end capability from sensors to strategy and everything in between. Again, pre-integrated at economic price point. So, speed is important. Many of these organizations are seeing the future where if they're not fast enough to change their business model, for instance, some OEM discrete manufacturers are going to have to move pretty quickly from just offering product to offering service. So if somebody's charging $50 million for capital equipment and their competitor is saying $10 million a year, and the service level is actually better because they're much smarter about what those assets are doing, the $50 million guy is going to go out of business. So, we come to the table with the ability to come in quickly, get that factory, get those assets smart and connected, make sure the right people and parts and process are brought to bear at exactly the right time, and that does drive all the things people are typically looking for: the uptime, the safety, the yield or performance of that facility. I think it just comes down to the challenge of if you don't have all the right parties together with that technology and expertise, you can very easily get stuck on something that takes a very long time to unravel.
That's very interesting when you move from a CapEx to an OpEx mentality, that every little bit of that margin goes to your bottom line, and therefore you're highly incentivized to look for whole new categories of ways to improve process efficiency. Any other hurdles, Olivier, that you see that you're trying to combat effectively with the consortium?
No, absolutely, Dan. I think the biggest hurdle is the level of complexity, and our customers do not know where to start. So the promise of us working together is really to show the value of this kind of open architecture injected into a 40-year-old process automation infrastructure, and demonstrate, as we did yesterday, and I invite your auditors to look at the YouTube on stage demo that we did yesterday with our robot, powered by our HP Edge line, is this idea that I can show very immediate value to the plant manager, to the quality manager, to the operation manager, using the data that resides in that factory already, that 70% or more are unused. Okay, that's the value. So how do you get that quickly? Simply, that's what we are working to solve, so that our customers can enjoy the benefit of the technology faster and the faster ROI.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is a technology implementation, but it's done in a category of the organization that might not think of IT in the same way as the business side, right? Back office applications, data processing. Is a challenge for many organizations a cultural one, where the IT organization doesn't necessarily know and understand this operational efficiency equation, and vice versa, and how are we bridging that?
I think I'm probably going to give you the high level, and from the OT side as well. I think these guys will definitely have more input from their own domain of expertise. For that in itself, in that these guys have that piece of information for that part that they know well, is exactly why this collaboration works really well. You have situations where I think with the idea of the IoT, a lot of people stood up and said, yeah, I can provide a solution. I have the answer. But I think we've done a really good job of understanding that we can do one part of this system, this solution, really well. And if we partner with the people who are really, really good in the other aspects, we provide a solution to customers that I don't think can be I suppose, competed with at this stage. And that is exactly why we're in this situation.
I would say to echo Dana, what you were saying, actually the biggest hurdle is more on the OT side, not really relying on the IT of the company. In many of our customers, it's pretty much a silo. The factory is a silo. In fact, for us at HPE, we've not been selling too much to that environment. That's why also working as a consortium is very important to get to the right audience within the factory and also bring our IT expertise, and especially in the areas of security. Because at the moment where you put an IT device in an OT environment, you have problems that you didn't have. At least, you have potentially problems that you didn't have before. You are living in a closed world. Now the value is to open up, and that's bring our security expertise, our managed service, our services competencies to that problem. It's a very important aspect.
Sorry, just to weigh in a little bit more there. I think it was a really interesting piece in the keynote yesterday where Aruba started to talk about how they had an issue when they started bringing conferencing technology out, and then suddenly everything wanted to be wireless, and then they went, oh, there's a bit of a security issue here now, isn't there? Everything's out there, and we can see what HPE have contributed to that, to helping them from that side. And essentially, I would say that what we're talking about here in the OT side is a very similar state to that from the security aspect, just a little bit further along in the timeline. And we're trying to work on that as well. And yet again, we've got HPE here who have it's essentially a load of experience in doing a very similar transformation.
It's a very good point as well, because HPE, we have, as you know, our data center and hybrid cloud group, and then we have our Aruba group. When we're doing OT and IoT, our industrial IoT, we're bringing the combination of those skills. For example, in security, we have our Aruba ClearPass technology that's going to secure not only those industrial equipments back to the network, and then bringing wireless, which will enable the augmented reality use cases that we shown yesterday on stage. So it's a phased approach, but you see the power of bringing ubiquitous connectivity into the factory, which is a challenge in itself, and then connecting securely these IT systems to this OT equipment. And you understand better kind of the phases and the challenges to bring the technology to life for our customers.
Yeah, just to add that one thing, I think it's important to think about some of these operational environments. So imagine a refinery the size of a small city, making sure that you have the right kind of wireless signal that's going to make it through all that piping and all those fluids, and everything's going to work properly. There's a lot of expertise, a lot of technology that we rely on from HPE to make that possible. And that's just one slice of kind of that stack where you can really get gummed up if you don't have all the right capabilities at the table right from the beginning.
Now, we've also put this in the context of not IoT and the edge isolated, but in the context of hybrid computing and taking advantage of what cloud can offer. It seems to me that there's also a new role here for a constituency to be brought to the table, and that's the data scientist in the organization, a new trove of data, elevated abstraction of analytics. How is that progressing? Are we seeing the beginnings of taking IoT data and integrating that, joining that, analyzing that in the context of data from other aspects of the company or even external data sets?
Yeah, I think there's a couple levels. At first, I think it's important to understand that when we talk about the economics, one of the things that has changed quite a bit is you can actually go in and get assets connected and do what we call anomaly detection. Pretty simplistic machine learning, but nonetheless, it's machine learning capability. In some cases, we can get that going in hours. So that's kind of a ground zero type capability. Over time, as you learn about, say, a line with multiple assets, and you learn about how all these function together, and then you learn how the entire facility functions, and then you compare that across multiple facilities. At some point, you're not going to be at the edge anymore. You're going to be doing a system of systems type analytics, and that's really going to be fundamentally maybe different. And combined at that point, you're talking about looking across weeks, months, years. You're going to go into a lot of your back end and maybe some of your IT systems to do some of that analytic. There's a spectrum that goes back down to the original idea of simply looking for something to go wrong on a particular asset. The distinction I'm making here is that in the past, yes, you would have to get a team of data scientists to figure out almost asset by asset how to create the models, iterate on that. That's a lengthy process in and of itself. Today, that at that ground zero level, that's essentially automated. You actually don't need a data scientist to get that set up. At some point, yes, as you incorporate different systems and you go across many different systems and long spaces of time, you're going to pull in additional sources and you'll get data scientists involved to do some pretty in-depth stuff. But you actually can get started fairly quickly without that work.
To echo what Phil just said, I think in HP we're talking about the tri-hybrid architecture. The edge, so let's say close to the things, the data center, and then the cloud, which could be a data center, you just don't know where it is, right? So that's kind of this three dimension. The great thing partnering with PTC is that the ThingWorx platform can run in any of those three let's say locations. The same platform. That's the beauty of our HPE Edgeline architecture. You do not need to modify anything. The same ThingWorx will work in the cloud, in the data center, on the Edgeline. And then to your point about the data scientist, very clearly again, time to insight. There are things you want to do immediately. And as Phil pointed out, the notion of anomaly detection that we're demonstrating on the show floor is actually really understanding those nominal parameters after a few hours of running your thing and simply detecting, something going off the normal. And that doesn't require much of data scientists. That's really intelligence into the ThingWorx platform. But then indeed, to the industrial processes, we're involving system integrator partners and using our own knowledge to bring along with our customers, because they own the intelligence of their data. Let's not forget that to the mix, and that's where it creates a very powerful solution.
I suppose another benefit that the IT organization can bring to this is process automation and extension. If you're able to understand what's going on in the device, not only would you need to think about how to fix that device at the right time, not too soon, not too late, but you might want to look into the inventory of the part, or you might want to extend into the supply chain if that inventory is missing, or you might want to analyze the correct way to get that part at the lowest price or under the RFP process. So are we starting to also see IT as a systems integrator, a process integrator role, so that the efficiency can extend deeply into the entire business process?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see how this stuff plays out. So yes, once you start to understand in your facility, or maybe it's not your facility, maybe you're servicing someone's facility, what kind of inventory should you have on hand? What should you have globally in a multi-tier, multi-echelon system? It opens up a lot of possibilities. Today PTC provides a lot of network visibility, a lot of spare parts inventory management and systems, but there's a limit to what these algorithms can do. They're really the best that's possible at this point, except when you now have everything connected. That feedback loop allows you to modify in real time all your expectations, get things on the move proactively, so the right person and parts, process, kit all shows up at the right time. And then you've got augmented reality and other tools, so that maybe somebody hasn't even done this service procedure before. Maybe they have never seen these parts before, but with a guided walkthrough and having everything showing up all nice and neat the day of, without anybody having to actually figure that out. Yeah, that's a big set of improvements that can really change the economics of how these facilities run.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other thoughts on process integration?
The one thought I would add is again, the premise behind this industrial IoT is indeed, as you pointed out, connecting the consumer, the supplier, and the manufacturer. And that's why you have also the emergence of like low power communication layer like LoRa or Sigfox that really can bring, these kind of millions of connected devices together and inject them into the systems that we are creating.
Gavin?
I think just from the conversation, I know that we're all really passionate about this, right? The IoT and the industrial IoT is a really just great topic for us, and it's so much bigger than what we're just talking about. You've talked a little bit about security. You've asked us about the cloud. You've asked us about the integration of the inventory and to the production side, and it is so much bigger than what we're talking about now. We could probably have twice this long of a conversation on any one of these topics and still never get halfway to the end of it. It's a really exciting place to be right now. And the really interesting thing that I think all of us now realise in the way that we've made advancements as a partnership as well is that two things. One, you don't know what you don't know. So I think that a lot of companies are waking up to that as well. And we're using our collaborations to allow us to know what we don't know.
Which is why speed is so important, because indeed, correct. I mean, we can theorize and spend a lot of time in R&D. The reality is bring those systems to our customers. We learn also new use cases and new ways to make the technology advance. Yeah?
And the way that technology has gone is that no one releases a product anymore that's the finished piece and that is going to stay there for 20, 30 years. That's not what happens. Products and services are being provided that get constantly updated. How many times a week does your phone update with different pieces of firmware? The app is being updated. You have to be able to change and take the data that you get to adjust everything that's going on. Otherwise, you will not stay ahead of the market. And that's exactly what Phil described earlier on when he was talking about, do you sell a product or do you sell a service that goes alongside a set of products as well? And that for me is one of the biggest things, is that constant innovation where we're going. And we're not at a stage, we've changed. We were kind of in a linear motion of progression. In the last little while, we've seen a huge amount of exponential growth in these areas. And we had a video yesterday at the end of the keynote where it was one of the HP's pieces of, what could the future
be? Yeah.
And I looked
romantic
at it,
as well.
Exactly, right? Everyone looked at it. We looked at it and thought it was, that's quite funny. There was an automated suitcase that would follow you after you left the airport. And I started to laugh at it, but then I took a second and I realised, well, maybe that's not as ridiculous as it sounds. Because we as humans think linearly. That's kind of incumbent upon us. But if the technology is changing in an exponential way, that means that we physically cannot ignore some of the most ridiculous ideas that are out there, because that's what's going to change industry. And even by having that video there, and by seeing what PTC are doing with the development that they have, and what we ourselves are doing in trying out different industries and different applications, we see 3 companies that are constantly looking for what might happen next and ready to pounce on that to take advantage of it with the expertise of each one.
Okay. We're just about out of time, but I'd like to hear a couple of ridiculous examples, pushing the envelope of what we can do with these sorts of technologies now. We don't have much time, so less than a minute each. If you could each come up perhaps with one example, named or unnamed, that might have seemed ridiculous at the time, but in hindsight is proven to be quite beneficial and productive. Phil?
Yes, I think what we're talking about is, in many cases, you can do this as an engineering with this, you can do this in service, but I think we've been talking a lot about manufacturing. So in a manufacturing journey, the opportunity, kind of as Gavin and Olivier are describing here, is at the level of what happened between pre and post electricity. So how fast things will run, the quality at which they'll produce products, and then therefore the business model that you can now have because of that capability. these are profound changes. You'll see uptimes in some of the largest factories in the world. I think go up double digits. You'll see lines run multiples times faster over time. These are things that if you just walked in today and walked in in a couple years to some of the people who run the hardest, it would be really hard to believe what your eyes are seeing at that point. Just like somebody before factories had electricity would be astounded by what they see today.
You know, one of the biggest issues at the most macro level in economics is the fact that productivity has plateaued for the past 10 or 15 years. People want to get back to where productivity was 3 or 4% a year. This sounds like it might be a big part of getting there. Olivier, an example?
Well, example would be more like maybe impact on mankind and wealth for humanities. Think about that with those technology combined together and 3D printing, you can have new class of manufacturers anywhere in the world. In Africa, for example. I mean, with real-time engineering, some of the concepts that we're demonstrating today, you're designing. So some of the other part of PTCs, CAD systems and PLM, and we're showing actually a real-time engineering on the floor again. You're designing those products. You do quick prototyping with your 3D printing, again, that could be anywhere in the world, and you have your users testing the real thing censored back to so understanding whether your engineering choices were actually relevant, if there are some difference between the digital model and the physical model, this digital twin idea, and then you're back into the drawing board, this DevOps model. So new class of manufacturers that we don't even know, serving customers across the world and creating wealth in areas that are today not industrialized.
Interesting that if you have a 3D printer, you might not need to worry about inventory or supply chain, right?
Just in time, yeah.
Gavin.
Just to add on that one point, the bit that really, really excites me about where we are with technology as a whole, not even just within the collaboration, you have the availability of 3D printing, you have the availability of open software. We all provide, very software-centric products, stuff that you can adjust yourself, and that is the way of the future. And that means that the changes that we see in the manufacturing industry, the next greatest idea could come from, someone who's been in the production plant for 20 years, or it could come from Phil, who works in the bank down the road, because he has the accessible, at a really, really good price point, he's the access to that technology. And that is one of the coolest things that I can think about right now. But to take a bit and just say where we've seen this sort of development and this use of these sort of technologies and implementations and seen a massive difference. You look at somewhere like Duke Energy in the States. We've worked with those guys probably before we realized where our capabilities were, and never mind how we could implement a great solution with PTC and with HPE. But even there, based off of our own technology, those guys in the power production side of things, in some legacy equipment, decided to try and do this sort of application, to have predictive maintenance, to be able to see what's going on in their assets, which are across a continent. And they're at a stage now over the last, they started this probably the start of 2013. They've seen themselves save what they estimate to be about $50 billion up to this point. That's a number.
That is a number, yes. Okay, well, great. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We've been exploring the rapidly evolving architectural shift of moving advanced IT capabilities to the edge to support Internet of Things requirements for operational integrity benefits. And we've learned how converged systems and high-performance data analysis platforms are bringing, in essence, the data center to the operational technology edge. And we've heard about some great results from that evolution. So please join me in thanking our panelists. We've been here with Phil McRell, General Manager of IoT Consortium at PTC. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
We've also been here with Gavin Hill, IoT Marketing Engineer for Northern Europe at National Instruments in London. Thank you, Gavin.
Thank you very much.
And lastly, we've been here with Olivier Frank, Senior Director of Worldwide Business Development and Sales for Edgeline IoT Systems at HPE. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dana. I really enjoyed it.
And thanks as well to our audience for joining us for this Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Voice of the Customer Digital Transformation discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host for this ongoing series of HPE-sponsored interviews. Thanks again for listening, and please come back next time.